All right, I'm just gonna have some real talk with you. For the last few months, I've been experimenting with some different things in my diet. Okay, how to find this optimal performance state, balancing carbohydrates coming into the diet while still doing a ketogenic diet largely, right? And how I can balance things. So full disclaimer, there's not a lot of clinical evidence that I can put in front of you for this video. It's largely anecdotal, my own experiences, and I'm taking things that I know from previous research and backing things up and learning, hey, this could be working because of X, Y, Z. So anyhow, this is some stuff that's a little bit experimental, but it might be fun for you to try. So when I'm working in performance settings, whether it's military or professional athletes or anything like that, always trying to find the optimum balance between mental performance, cognitive function, and physical performance. Okay. Now we largely know that the ketogenic diet is very, very good for endurance work and very good for mental performance, but it falls a little bit short in terms of anaerobic potential, your ability to perform brute strength activity and stuff like that. So we're always trying to find a balance. So my goal the last few months has been, well, how do I transition out of keto strategically in order to implement carbohydrates so that I restore carbohydrate levels in my body enough to really have maximum performance. Now, I'm really just kind of paraphrasing here, but let me explain a little bit about what I've done and what I've learned through this process. But before I get into that, please do hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and please hit that bell icon to turn on notifications. And then after this video, you have got to check out Perfect Keto's new peanut butter cookies. These things are unreal. I talked about it a little bit in this video, but just if you don't make it to that point, you have to check them out. There's a special link, special discount down below. Perfect Keto is a big supporter of this channel, so thank you. But these peanut butter cookies are, whoa, they are a whole different level. So make sure you check them out. Special link down below. And thank you, Perfect Keto, for the constant continued support on this channel. All right, let's rock. Okay, so this started with me coming off of the ketogenic diet for about a week. Now, ordinarily, whenever I come off of a ketogenic diet, I do it very clean and very strict. But without fail, every time I come off of the ketogenic diet for any amount of time at all, I start feeling cruddy. I feel cruddy in the beginning. I feel foggy. I feel like my body's not working, and I want to go back into keto as soon as possible. There are countless times where I say, okay, I'm going to give myself a little bit of time to come off of keto, restore properly, and I throw in the towel and I go back to keto. Now, here's what's interesting. There's a reason for why I probably feel cruddy when I come off the ketogenic diet. Okay, it has to do with the fact that you become glucose intolerant. What that means is you've been doing ketogenic diet for so long, or going low carb for so long, that you're actually not good at processing glucose when you ingest it. So you become glucose intolerant. Your body doesn't really know what to do with it. So what happens? Your blood sugar goes up and your body doesn't know how to process it, and you feel cruddy and you want to go right back to keto, and rightfully so. Well, this time I said, wait a minute. Okay, I'm not having to film as much right now. Things are, rocky, the state of the world and everything like that. Maybe this is my time to experiment a little bit. So I pushed through. I pushed through that period where I would normally throw in the towel and go back keto. And I found that after about 3 weeks, I didn't feel foggy anymore. I started to feel amazing. I started to have all the benefits that I got from the ketogenic diet mentally, but I was still able to perform at a high anaerobic level. I was able to lift more. I was able to have pretty superior anaerobic performance for running, high intensity interval training, everything like that. But I still had a lot of the benefits of the ketogenic diet. Then as time went on, a couple more weeks, I started to lose the benefits of the ketogenic diet and started to become much more of a glucose burner. I was strong. I felt good performance-wise, but I was definitely losing the mental edge. I could just feel it. What I started realizing was going on was that there's a period of fat adaptation that occurs when you go into the ketogenic diet. You go start keto and it takes you a few weeks for your body to start learning how to use fats properly, okay? And these changes that you make to your cells when you go through that, they could be pretty long lasting. I don't know if they're permanent, but they're pretty long lasting, okay? So then what happens when I went off of keto is it took a while for my mitochondria, for my cells to get used to burning glucose again, okay? Now, the cool thing is I was still largely fat adapted, okay? So what that means is my body at the cellular level was still fat adapted, was still used to using ketones, was still burning a lot of fat as a fuel source. It was still doing really good with that, but it was also really good at utilizing glucose at that point in time. I was in this little sweet spot, and it has to do with mitochondrial biogenesis. So mitochondrial biogenesis is where your mitochondria is adapting and changing. And we have a certain number of half-lives that the mitochondria would go through before it would become ultimately a new evolution of mitochondria, a new generation, if you want to call it that. So that period of time, 3 weeks after I went off of keto, was just a supreme sweet spot where I had all the benefits of keto, but I was also able to process glucose effectively. Then after a couple of weeks of doing that, my mitochondria shifted back to utilizing glucose and started to lose the benefits of that fat adaptation. So I started to become more of a glucose burner. So you see what I'm saying here. There was a period where I was pure keto and I was really good in that world. Then there was this sweet spot transition period, and then there was this glucose burner period where I got the benefits there. So the point is, we need to be able to find and identify this sweet spot for each of us. Now here's where things get really interesting. What if we could get ourselves to this sweet spot, okay, 3 weeks or so, depending on the individual, after keto, but then we were able to extend it. Okay, now how I would assume we could extend this, and I've experimented a bit myself and it seems to work, is to, at that point, once you are in that 3-week sweet spot, implement longer periods of intermittent fasting, longer periods or even prolonged fasting. And here's why. You are already fat adapted through the ketogenic diet. You start to lose that benefit because you've implemented carbs, but you're still in that sweet spot. But if you at this point are still fat adapted and you start adding longer term fasting, like 24-hour fasts or alternate day fasting, like fast every other day, then you're giving yourself the benefit of both. You've allowed yourself to be keto adapted and fat adapted, but you're also still consuming carbohydrates. So during this period, after you've transitioned out of keto, if you go into alternate day fasting, and on the days you do eat, you consume a good amount of carbohydrates, but you still aggressively fast on your off days, you get the benefit of ketones because you're so fat adapted. Whereas someone that hasn't followed a ketogenic diet for a long period of time, if they were to jump right into alternate day fasting, it would take them months to be able to get themselves to the point where they're truly fat adapted. And the reason is if you look at fat adaptation, once again, it's just like learning a language. Okay, if you go to Italy, and I've used this analogy before, and you live there for a while, you're going to get immersed in the culture, you're going to learn the language, right? But if you go to Italy for a week and then you come back for a week, go to Italy for a week, come back and forth, you're not going to learn the language nearly as much. Well, your mitochondria, your cells, they operate the same way. Full immersion is best. Okay, but let me add this to the equation. If you went to Italy for 6 months and you learned how to speak Italian, okay, and then you went back to the US and then you went back to Italy every other week, you would maintain your Italian fluency pretty well, right? Well, that's exactly what I'm getting at. And there's no real clinical stuff to back this up because no one's talking about it. But this is what I'm starting to implement with some of my high performance people that I work with and groups, right? Like, how do we see, okay, we need extreme performance, extreme athleticism, and high cognitive function at this point in time. So maybe we say we go strict ketogenic diet, and then we come off, and then we find that sweet spot, and then we implement fasting. So a few weeks of not doing keto or fasting, eating foods that would feel, maybe a little bit of fasting, but foods that would normally feel foreign. Okay, sweet potatoes, red potatoes, butternut squash, stuff like that. Okay, now I will admit when I was transitioning off of keto, I was still eating ketogenic foods. I was still eating some good amount of cookies. I was eating the perfect keto cookies and stuff like that, which, by the way, I'll put a link down below because a lot of people have asked about them. So highly recommend you check them out. They've come out with some peanut butter cookies and stuff. Oh my gosh, they're just dangerous. Anyhow, check them out down below. There's a special link if you want to check them out. So, a few keto foods, I would still have macadamia nuts. I would still have things like that. And then as I got more strict and I developed sort of a protocol for that, I reduced the fats a lot more. So anyhow, right now I'm sort of in that sweet spot and I'm trying to maintain it with different periods of fasting. I'm fasting today and I feel just like I have the benefits of when I was deep into a ketogenic diet. So what I would suggest that you do is create a protocol for yourself. If you're doing keto right now, draw a hard line in the sand and say, okay, I'm going to implement eating some sweet potatoes. I'm going to implement eating some red potatoes. Try to get yourself to 100, 150 grams of carbohydrates a day. Do that for a couple of weeks. Push through the fogginess because it's inevitably going to be there because you're going to be somewhat glucose intolerant and it's a known fact that happens. But push through that gnarly threshold and then you'll realize, wait a minute, now I actually feel okay as long as you're eating clean. But don't let yourself get complacent with feeling okay, because what's going to happen is law of attrition. You're eventually just going to allow yourself to continue to eat like that, and you're going to lose the benefit if you're not really in touch with yourself. Okay, so once that point hits, when you start feeling like you're losing performance, then switch over to alternate day fasting. Okay, at which point I would recommend just going 24 hours on, 24 hours off. Okay, so eat one day, fast another day. Eat one day, fast another day. And that way you're just going to find yourself getting into that little sweet spot. So anyway, this is all just anecdotal stuff I'm experimenting with, and I'm sure you'll be hearing a lot more about it as time goes on. So make sure you comment down below and let me know if you want to hear more about this experiment, you want to try this stuff out. I think it's the new era of ketogenic cycling and being able to ultimately determine the best period to get optimal performance and how you can cherry pick it and then hopefully extend it. As always, keep it locked in here on my channel, and I'll see you in the next video.